Hey guys, welcome back. Today I decided that I'm finally going to tackle a zip around wallet. So this pattern is by Billy 50. It comes with the outside strap. It's got an inside zipper pocket, a slip pocket, and some card slots. So if you'd like to see how I do this, please stay tuned. Okay, so I'm going to start with the ironing of the card slots. Now to cut them out, I have laminated this piece, which means it's not going to bend. So what I did was I took a manila folder and then chopped off one edge so that we've got like a nice sharp corner. So I just chopped like, I don't know, half an inch off just to square out that edge. And then I've marked all of these markings onto there. And then I scored it with a dead pen. So there's no actual pen mark. But I have scored it the way it needs to fold. And then I have added about 1/4 inch from how wide the fabric should be and popped it down there. So now this will fold up to be the pockets. Now the manila folders aren't quite long enough, but that actually doesn't matter. As long as we get all the folds in, that's what we want. So I'm going to take my waterproof canvas and I'm going to square it up in the top right corner. And then I'm going to use 2 Wonder Clips to clip it on the top. I forgot to grab some, so hold on a second. All right, so I lay it down flat on the ironing board. And then I'm going to clip the top corner and then clip the other top corner. Now the first fold in this wallet actually goes behind. So what I want to do is I want to do that fold, making sure that everything's straight. And then I'm going to just iron that one fold because I can't keep ironing if those clips are on there. So now that the first one's done, I'm going to make sure that the edge is lined up with the edge of the cardboard. And then fold that up. Like that, and then back down. And the idea is that when you're finished, that will line up along the bottom, like so. So then I'm just going to come along and iron it. Now you can iron waterproof canvas, or at least the one that I provide. My iron's set to the hottest setting, which is very, very hot. And it still irons quite well. So now that I've done that, I can take that out and then just refold everything to give it a press without the cardboard in there, because you'll get a better press. Making sure that everything's lined up. Okay, so now that that's all done, we can head to the sewing machine. So it should look like this with a flap down the back. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is just top stitch all of my card pockets. So I'm using my Vardnum thread, so my heavyweight, but you probably actually don't need the heavyweight for anything but the outside if you wanted to. Now, if you're terrible at top stitching, you can actually skip this step. This is more of a decorative stitch than anything else. But I like to do it because I like decorative. Now this thread is, I think, teal from Vardnum Threads. And it may not look like it matches, but I held it up against it and it actually looked really nice. So that's why we're doing it. I'm also making sure I backstitch at the start and the end to make sure that it doesn't come undone on me, because that would be annoying. Alright. So that's now our card slots top stitched. And again, if you're a beginner and new at this, you can definitely skip that section. So now we've got this. So what we want to do is we want to take a ruler and an erasable pen, and we're going to measure halfway between, well, down the center, halfway between the two sides, which is just the center. So also make sure your pen's are going to work. There we go. And then you're going to stitch with the back piece folded down. We're going to stitch from the bottom to the top. Now, you might ask, why do we have to do it that way? And the answer is because these are less likely to move if you stitch from the bottom up. If you stitch top to bottom, they shift, which is obviously not what we want. And then if you want to, you can come along the edges and just kind of tack them down like that. Always chopping off our tails as we go. And then I'm not going to go top to bottom, because what that does is that leaves these the opportunity to bend out of place. So I'm still just going to do bottom to top, sorry, and put the bulk in my machine, which is normally something I wouldn't do, but in this instant, it's worth it. So that's our card slots, beautifully done. So we can pop those aside. Now I'm going to take my little like half panel. Now the pattern actually calls for you to put that together and put binding along the edge. It does look cute, but because I'm using the waterproof canvas, I'm actually just going to put right sides together, stitch 1/4 inch, and then flip it over and top stitch it. And the reason I'm doing this instead is because it's going to keep the bulk down for me. Because the first time I made this wallet, it's the last bit that's the hardest, and it was very, very bulky. So I'm just going to fold both sides down and then stitch 1/8 inch from the top. Like that. So that's now our slip pocket. So what you can do is you can actually grab one of your lining outside pieces and you can baste that on. So by basting everything together, we're going to be working with less pieces later. So I've just done a very, very small seam allowance of about 1/8 inch. So that is now our slip pocket done. With our card slots, we can do the same thing to the other pocket. Now, obviously, these corners are square. So what we want to do is we want to line it up at the bottom and the sides and then flip it over and then stitch around. So you just want to make sure, if you're worried, you can do it this way. So you stitch the bottom first, and then you can come up one side. Ignore that thread, it's just got stuck. And then we can just come to the other side and stitch the other little bit down. That is an easier way if you're worried about not being able to do all the corners. That was a weird word I just made up. All right, so now you've got this with these little extra bits. So we can just take a pair of scissors and using our base template, we're just going to trim everything to be in line with our black piece. And there's like a smidgeny bit I'm taking off the side. So now it's got its curved corners again, but we didn't have to worry about that math when we were folding everything. So that's definitely quicker. And it's not like you're wasting a lot of fabric. So that's now the two inside walls completed. So now I want to take my zipper pocket. So I've got two lining pieces and I've got two of my outside fabric. Now the pattern actually shows you a way to do it with 3 different colors. While I did use 3 different colors because I made my card slots a different color, you can do it with 2. You could do it with more if you wanted to. Okay, where is my zip? So I'm just going to be using a black zip. So I'm going to take my zipper scissors to cut off a piece. Now again, there's many ways you could do this. If you wanted to, you could add zipper tabs to make it look fancy. You can use a smaller zipper than I am. I'm going to use size 5 because that's what I've got. I don't actually have any size 3 at home, but size 3 is just a dress zip that you can get from, you know, Spotlight. So we want to figure out which way is the top, so I'm going to use this as the top just because I can. So I've put lining right sides up, the zipper right, like facing up the right way, and then I'm going to sandwich this down on top with right sides facing down. This is my zipper sandwich. We're going to back stitch at the start and then stitch all the way along. So the way I got a very straight line then was I was running the edge of my foot up against the zipper. So I'm just going to fold over this top piece and finger press it down, and then I'm going to top stitch, but just this side. So I'm using a 1/8 seam allowance for this, and then I'm going to fold that down and finger press it down out of the way. So that's one side done. Now we're just going to repeat that process. So lining up, zipper up, top piece down, and this only requires some zips for your hardware, which I really like actually. I'm forever using a lot of hardware, so this is kind of a fun way to just use just zipper heads. You can get a bit crazy with them if you want to. If you use a zipper head with this, with a hole in the top, so for example like that, if you use one like that, you could actually clip a wristlet strap onto this as well. I know it comes with a strap already, but not everybody likes the handheld clutch straps. You could have a wristlet strap attached to your zipper for the outside. All right, so I'm going to install my zipper. So I'm just going to crack this open just a little bit, so about that much, and then I'm going to feed both sides through my zipper. Now I'm using a fork that is attached to a clamp on my bench, but it gets the zipper on nice and well. I chose the antique, what is it, bronze, whatever, because of this kind of warmer color here. I think that goes quite nicely. So you want to zip it up 2/3 of the way and then unzip it 2/3 of the way to make sure that your zipper pull's not going to get stuck anywhere. And then we're going to stitch all the way around. Now, for beginners, I will use clips to show you. In my first one I didn't actually use clips. It's up to your skill level. Don't be embarrassed to use clips. Nobody's watching, not even me. Might feel like it because, you know, you've probably got me on a screen, but I promise I'm not watching or judging how many clips you use, because on the final part of this, I am going to use so many clips. All right, so the more the merrier. You want to make sure that all your corners are nice and squared up. Now, this is the only part of the pattern where we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. What this is going to do is it's going to make it just that little bit smaller so it fits inside. My demo one I did not do that because I didn't read the instructions because I thought I was being clever. Big mistake. All right, so we're going to stitch a few and then back stitch a few, and I'm going to leave about this much of a gap in the lining. So I'm locking my stitches in. Now, another thing, if you can't eyeball 1/2 inch, measure it on there with your ruler, just all the way around. Doesn't matter. It's a good way to eyeball things until you get used to that, because eventually you can judge how much you've got hanging out the side. Needle down and pivot. Needle down and pivot. Another thing you could do is, if you don't think you're going to remember to do a different seam allowance here, what you could do is cut down your original pattern. And what that will do is then you don't have to think about your seam allowance. Okay, just what it looks like. we're going to take our scissors and we're going to trim off pretty much all of the excess. I don't really want any of it there. I'm going to trim off more as I get to the corners and then leave about 1/4 inch the rest of the way around. Now, to make sure that I don't wreck my scissors, when I get to the zip, I actually open them up as far as I'll go. So I'm cutting the zip with the back part of my scissors. This will keep them sharper for longer, and it means I don't have to switch to do that little snip there. If you were worried about wrecking your good scissors though, just switch to your zipper scissors and come snip the zipper parts. Alright, that can go in the bin. Now I'm going to turn it through the hole. So I'm just kind of going to gather it and get a corner, and I'm going to put my finger in it and then pinch it with my thumb like this and then push it through. Mine sounds a bit funny because it's the waterproof canvas, but you could definitely use cotton. But if you're going to interface it, make sure it's a very light interfacing. You don't want this thing too thick. The outer pieces I did interface with a Form Fuse 1600 because I want them to be firm. And then I use the waterproof canvas so it could be lighter for the rest of it. Alright, so before I stitch this shut, I want to make sure that all my corners are nice and out. Like so. And then I'm just going to pull these edges, and your extra fabric there should just go into your bag. Like that. And then, so if you're using a cotton, you can iron that. But if you're using a waterproof canvas, you can actually just finger score it and it will stay. Finger press. I don't know. Use a credit card to like fold the edge. And then I'm just going to stitch that little bit shut. If this wasn't a video, I would have changed that to black so you wouldn't see those stitches. Also, that would be a good place to put any kind of fabric tags you put into your items. If you sell them, or if you want to have like a made with love for family or something. So there we go. That is now your zipper part. So we're getting there. We don't have many pieces left, believe it or not. So these are going to be my little accordion parts. So I am just using the waterproof canvas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to stitch around, across the top, down, and leave a little gap down here. Alright, you can probably leave the gap anywhere. Just make sure you remember to leave one. Needle down, pivot. So again, it really helps me that I've got a 1/4 inch foot. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm just going to chain stitch this, which means I'm not going to chop that off. I'm just going to keep sewing. What that does is it saves a little bit on thread and time. And if you were making multiples of these at the same time, this is definitely a quicker way to chain stitch everything. Now, if this wasn't an original video, like if this was my second video in this, I would actually chain stitch all of this instead of doing each individual line and then cutting and doing it again. I'd do a line, do one of these, do a line, do the other one, do a line, do something else. I like chain stitching because it means less tails that I have to remember to take off. But for the purposes of a tutorial video, I don't do that. Unless I'm teaching you how I speed sew. So I'm just going to chop off the corners. Now you'll notice I'm not just chopping at a 45-degree angle. If I did that, that's not going to turn as nicely as if I took a little bit more off. So I'm going to do that to both of my pieces. And then I'm going to turn them in the right way. And then top stitch them. Because it's pretty. And because we have to stitch that opening closed. So by top stitching the whole thing, you kind of don't notice that that's what you're doing. This particular pattern piece would also be a really good size for a pin cushion. If you ever needed to make one, this is a good size. So I'm just pushing all of my corners out. I'm going to do both of them roughly, and then I'm going to get something to actually poke the corners out properly because I want them to be nice and crisp. Now this one I didn't really leave a big enough hole, so this is going to be way more difficult to turn. And that was me too busy talking to you and not paying enough attention to what I'm doing. But that's okay. I still get there, it just takes me a bit longer. Okay, so that's most of the way out, but those corners look terrible. So I'm going to take my stiletto, which apparently it's what Americans call it, and I love that word so much more than sewing awl. And then I'm just going to put it in and kind of push, like ease out that corner to make it nice and pointy. Now you don't want to do this too rough, or you will either over pull it or you might rip a stitch. So you just want to be very gentle if you're going to do this. But see how the corners are much more cornery now. So I'm going to do the same to this one. So I'm just going to put it in and kind of ease it out. That one's fine. If you don't have one of these, you could use a chopstick to push it from the other side. Just be very careful that you don't push too hard and then push your chopstick through. I have done that before, which is why I use my other turning thing, my flute cleaner. Because I find I can be as rough as I want with that, and I don't have any issues. All right, so now I'm going to top stitch. So I might actually put it up to a more decorative length. So I've put it up to 3 3/4. In fact, I'll put it all the way up to 4. Why not? I am going to start in a corner, and I'm going to stitch the hole shut first, and then pivot. And I'm doing a 1/8 seam allowance. And if you've turned your corners out well, this should look really nice. All right, so next one. So I've just pushed that out a little bit, and now I'm going to chain stitch the second one. I really like this color thread too. I will put a link in the description highlighting the actual color that this is. I think it was called aqua or teal maybe, I don't know. I will find out for you and it will be in the description because it's pretty. Alright, so I just did 2 little back stitches. And so now we've got this. Now the pattern asks you to fold it in half and then fold each side back out to create a W. Right? So you're going to have, oh there you go, it's an M, W. So you fold it directly in half and then each side back down on itself, and then you've got to press this. So I'm actually going to pause the video so I can go and iron these. So you go in half and then fold the top down and then turn it over and fold the top down again. And that will give you your W. Oh, this might finger press. If this was cotton, I'd definitely iron it. But because it's the waterproof canvas, I think I'm okay. Just get some nice crisp lines. So again, I'm just using my fingernail to create that. Okay, I'm okay with that. So now we're going to take one of these and pop it on here. And you want to do it, and I actually use a ruler for this. The pattern says 1/4 inch from the bottom. So I'm going to listen to the pattern. So there. So we're putting the middle fold on there so that you've got an even amount on both sides, and we're just going to stitch that on. Now, you want to make sure that you're capturing the lining piece as well as the outside, because that's going to help the lining sit flat and beautiful. So I'm going to start from the bottom, do a couple of back stitches, stitch all the way to the top, and then pull it out. Now that's still not very thick, so a domestic machine will get through that fine, for anyone that's wondering. And now I've got this little accordion bit like this. So I'm going to take this one and do the same thing. I'm going to measure. Make sure they're even. You can even just fold it in half and measure them up that way. Whatever's going to work for you. But you just want to make sure that you're on, that crease is directly on the side seam. I'm going to pull my tails to the back. And then back stitch when I get to the top of the side tab. Alright, so that's that bit done. Huzzah! Alright, so now I've got all of our inside pieces. We just need to build our outside piece and our zipper piece. And it looks like I've lost some pieces. So this is our zipper piece. Now, the pattern comes wider than I personally need, but she's done that deliberately, and I like the way she's done that. So depending on how wide your zipper tape is, that will depend on how wide these pieces are. Now mine is 1 1/4 wide. So I'm going to trim these down, and I did this deliberately on camera for you guys. I'm going to trim it down before I stitch it, because that's going to be easier to do it now than once they're all joined. So I'm just going to draw on the back of my fabric in a normal pen. And then I'm just going to trim that excess off now. Now, obviously, I would do that. Actually, what I would do is I would take my pattern down to 1 1/4, because all of mine are 1 1/4 wide. But you can get very wide zipper tape sometimes. So the fact that she's made it wider is good, because if you're using a super chunky one, it would suck if it's then the wrong size. But I only use 1 1/4 wide, so that's my number 5 zipper tape. So my pattern will actually, as of this point, go down to be the exact size I need. Okay, so it then says to measure, and I'm not using those scissors, I'm using my zipper scissors, exactly 17 inches. Now if you get this wrong, it's not going to fit. So measure properly. So you only need 2 lengths of zipper for this, which is really good. Alright. Now, before I start sewing, I'm going to put my zipper head on now, so that I don't forget. So again, I'm just going to crack this in half. Actually, I'll do it without the zipper pull. So what I do is I sit this exactly halfway in, and then I put the other side halfway in, and you can see from the top, you want to make sure that they're even, and then you just push on the zipper head and it goes on. That takes practice, so don't be disheartened if you don't get it the first time. But you can do them without a zipper jig. Zipper jigs are just a little bit quicker. Alright, so we're going to take our gusset pieces and we're going to put our lining right side up and then our zipper right side up. Now this should measure perfectly on there, and then we're going to take this piece and do this right sides down. Now, it doesn't matter which side is the top and the bottom. We worry about that later. So I'm going back to my joining stitch length, which is 2 1/2 for me. And I'm just going to stitch 1/4 inch from that edge. And I'm going to back stitch. I really want to make sure that that's not going to come off, because this is, you know, an integral part of the wallet. So I'm going to pull both of these down, and I'm going to top stitch that down at 1/8 inch. I'm also going to make sure that I back stitch. And then back stitch again. Awesome. So now I'm going to take, doesn't matter which sides, we can take the lining side and match that up, making sure that there's no twists. And then I'm just going to bring this from the side like this. I'm not going to try and roll this all up inside. It's too complicated. So I'm just going to grab the lining, make sure it's flat like this, join one side, it doesn't matter which, and then grab the other one and just place it on top like that so that we've got a sandwich. As long as you don't twist anything, this will work fine. So again, stitching, back stitching, pull it out, trim off your tails, and then again, so when you do this, everything should be flat. If it's not flat, stop and unpick now before we top stitch this last little bit. So again, 1/8 of an inch, couple stitches, back stitch at both ends so that's nice and locked in. You don't want little bits. Okay, I've got to go and grab my foam and my handle strap piece, and then we are ready to construct. Okie dokie. So I've got my foam, so you should have like a weird skinny bit and then 2 of these. Now I've also changed my handle. In the first one that I sewed, I interfaced this piece, I interfaced the other piece, I did it with a woven medium, and it was too thick and I almost snapped the needle in the final stitching stage. So I have learnt from that, and so this I have not interfaced. And then I've just got a 1-inch piece of vinyl I'm going to stick over the top. So it's still going to have an accent, it's just going to be a bit thinner. So I folded both sides into the center. Now I'm literally just going to place this over the top and I'm going to stitch it down. So I'm still going to have an accent handle. It's just going to be less thick because the thickness nearly killed me. I did a couple of things wrong in my first one, which is why I'm not showing you. But I learnt a lot and I have worked out how to fix those problems for you guys. So you could definitely do this in fabric. I just wouldn't interface it. Because if it's too thick, the final stitch is hell on earth. I actually wrecked mine quite a lot. My fabric wasn't a very good printed fabric anyway, but I've got so many perforation holes it took the ink out. All right, so that's my pretty handle. Oh, there's a thread. That's all right. There we go, pretty handle. So that, I want to make sure when I attach the handle, it's on this side of the bag. If you put it on the side with the pockets, all of that is too thick with all the extra stuff we've got to add in, and it's way too hard to stitch. So that is the first thing I'd like to say. Make sure it goes on this side due to thickness issues, especially if you're on a domestic. This thing couldn't handle it. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste one side of this. It doesn't matter which side. So I want to stitch as close to the edge as possible. So about 1/8 of an inch. And just seal up one side of the fabric band. Trim off my tails. That's another thing. Trim your tails as you go. Then I'm going to take my skinny piece of foam and insert it into there, like so. And then I'm going to stitch the other side shut. So that's going to hold the foam in place while we're doing all the stitching. Okie dokie. And again, trim off your tails. So now, oh, I missed a bit. Now I'm going to do it again. There we go. Cool. So now that's nice and sealed, the foam can't go anywhere, and we can now just treat that as one piece. So it's going to be easier to stitch in a minute. So I'm going to start with, which side do I like more? So I've got my 2 sides. You've got to decide which one you like more because the other one's going to have the handle across it. So I'm going to baste the handle in place. So in the center. So you can just either eyeball the center or actually, you know, fold it in half if you can't eyeball it. I should teach you this. Fold it in half, snip, fold it in half. Don't use snips. I'm likely to get myself. We're also going to have to find all four of like the center anyway. So while we're here, we may as well do that. So you want to find the center of all four of your sides. You may as well do it to all of it while I've got the scissors here. You could also do this at the cutting stage if you wanted to. And the last one. Okay. So, take this, place it on the center. Now it is a little bit longer, but that's okay. We're just going to base it in place. Again, right on the edge. You can even flip it over if you can't see. If you're worried that you're going to miss it, flip it over, center it up, and then just stitch within your seam allowance like that. Ta-da! Trim off your tails as always, and then you can also trim off any excess you've got from your handle. Alright, so now we're going to take our what's it called? Gusset? Zipper gusset. Call it whatever you like, really. And I want to get something that's going to mark my zipper tape. So because this is a black zipper, I'm going to use the white chalk Chaco pens. And so then I'm going to also mark the opposite. So this is going to help me find all my centers. So the idea of the chalk pen is it's going to leave a chalky residue at the halfway point like that. So then I can match up those two halfway points there and then squish it out, and then that is a halfway point as well. You could also clip it if you want to. I don't love clipping my zipper tape more than I have to because it can go very frayy very quickly. Whereas this is removable, it hasn't hurt anything. And I can very clearly see where all my markings are. So, now we want to take, if this is directional, you want to take your bottom and line it up with your bottom. Like this. Now we're just taking the outside piece for now. We're going to do them all one at a time because it's easier. So I've clipped along the bottom. Now I want to take my top notch and match it up with my top marking that I did in my chalk and clip that. Like I said, I'm about to use a lot of clips. You're going to want a lot. Then we're going to come to our side marking and match up our sides like this. You'll notice I'm missing the corners for now. That is a deliberate thing. We are avoiding the corners. We're going to do them in a minute or 5. All right, and so then the other side, match that up. Like that. So now we've got this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go along and stitch the straight edges. I'm going to go back to a joining stitch. So I'm going to stop when I get to the corners, take it out, and then go do the other sides. So what this is going to do is it's going to hold everything where I need it, and then I can deal with the corners when I'm ready. Yep. And that just come unthreaded because I didn't leave a big enough tail. If you feel confident that you can get around a corner without having any issues, by all means go ahead. But that's what I did in the first one that I did, my trial, and that was a mistake. But if you're feeling up to it, by all means, go right ahead. But I'm trying to make this as beginner friendly as possible, because it's only this joining bit of this whole thing that's somewhat difficult. It's not impossible, it's just a little bit difficult. So again, we're just stitching the straight bits. Yeah. Okay. So now to help this fit, this is what we've got. So our corners aren't stitched, but they sit almost where we need them to. They do need a little bit of help, so I am actually going to clip my zipper tape, but only a very little bit. I don't want to stitch where I'm going, I don't want to clip where I'm going to stitch, so I'm just clipping it, just 3 per corner, to help it ease out to where I need it to. Now normally I wouldn't do this, and I'm also really paranoid, so I'm going to come and I'm going to melt it where I've clipped it so that it doesn't fray, because every time I've clipped a zip it frays and I'm really paranoid about that. So I'm just bending that edge over and then just quickly running the cigarette lighter over it to make sure it won't fray. So now that I've clipped it, you can see that that moves out to the corner really, really well. You can't see, I didn't show you. So see when I do that? See how it just goes out to the corner nicely. So I've only clipped, if you've ever looked at zipper tape, it's got like directional bits. I've only clipped to the first directional bit, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, I apologize. So now I'm going to come along with my clipped bits, and I'm going to add some more clips, wonder clips, to my clipped bits. Why did I say the word clipped a lot? I need to call these something else. And then I'm going to just do all the corners. The second side should be easier because it's already got its shape, by the way. So now I just need to stitch the corners. Making sure we back stitch. And then heading around the corner and just join up with the other lot of stitching we did. I don't know if you could hear that. That was my stomach. Apparently I would like food. I'm also going to move the zipper out of my way and just, again, join up with the other side. So this actually now sits really, really nicely. See? Little clips into your zipper tape. Not big ones, because you don't want to go into where you're going to stitch, or you're going to see the clips from the other side, and then that wrecks it. So just very, very little ones, and probably only 3 to 4 per side, depending on how confident you're feeling about your clipping skills. It's no different than when you do piping and you clip it so that it fits around the edge better. Same principle. And look, now we have it in, and it looks wonderful. So what I want to do is I'm going to push all the zipper tape in, and I'm going to take a lining piece. Now again, we've used the handle side, so I want the thinnest possible part. So I'm going to take the slip pocket side, and again, we need to know where the bottom is. So the bottom is where your fabric is. So we're going to find the center of these pieces now. Just a little clip to make sure it's going to be in the seam allowance. Like so. Okay, So then we're going to place the bottom on the bottom, sandwiching the zip in between. Now, another thing we're not going to do, we're not actually going to stitch the bottom closed. Sounds weird, I know, but you've got to be able to turn it through somehow. So I'm just going to put in the 2 clips to there, and then I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to come up the top, match up my centers. Grab a handful of clips, I think. Now this time, because we've clipped the zip, we should be able to stitch the whole way round in one go. If you don't feel confident doing that, that is okay. Feel free to just do it the other way. But now that I've got the zip sitting down and flat where I want it, this should all work out. So I'm just pushing the zip. I probably shouldn't have done black on the camera. Sorry, guys. I'm pushing the zip down and out of the way and then adding a clip to make sure that I'm going to stitch close but not on the zipper tape, teeth part. You know what I mean. All right. Now, this is being quite difficult here because it wants to be unzipped. So what I'm actually going to do, probably should have done this before I started. I actually want to open the zipper teeth so that they're separate. And I want to have the zipper pull on a straight part, not a curve. So I'm actually going to do that because this corner was not cooperating the way I wanted it to. Because the zipper being closed was making it too bulky. And that's obviously not what we want. So again, we're just going to add it back into the clips. Pushing the zipper tape out of the way so that we won't accidentally stitch it. If you've ever done a Baronia bowler bag, it's the same principle, but because this is smaller and tighter curves, it just makes it a little more tricky. It's not impossible. Lots and lots of clips though. So when we take one off, everything else will still stay exactly where we've placed it. So then I'm just going to shove all of that in, like so. Lots and lots and lots of clips. So they're almost touching currently, my clips. Because I prefer to have too many clips than not enough and I do something wrong. Because then I have to unstitch it and I hate unpicking. Alright. That might seem excessive to you, but I'm pretty happy with that many clips. So now I'm going to stitch from the clip around to the other clip. Now we want to leave the gap at the bottom because that's going to be the easiest place to hide the bit when we turn it through. So, I don't think it matters which side's up, although if we do it this side up, you can see where your other stitching is, because you either want to be exactly on that line or maybe one stitch closer so that you don't see the stitching. So having it this side up is probably the most beneficial. Now again, round the corners, slow and steady wins the race. We're not in a hurry. Straights are obviously easier, but don't get cocky and go really, really fast, because then you'll still have to unpick stuff. Alright, so come around the curve, get onto the straight, back stitch it, and voila. Now you should have this weird looking, and it's squishy and it's padded. And then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to clip off the excess at the corners. I know it just looks like dust and rubbish, but that's going to help us. So now we just pull or push, whichever way you'd prefer to do it. Your wallet, or half your wallet, through the hole, like so. And make sure that your handle is on the right side, otherwise it's going to be very, very hard to turn it. Okay. So far so good. That's a good corner. That's a good corner. Ah, okay, I'm happy. I'm very, very happy, guys. So, I've turned it through, and I'm checking my corners, and I haven't stitched the teeth. Nothing's in the way. That one there's probably just like one stitch wonky, but that's not the end of the world. So far, I'm pretty happy. Alright, so this is what the outside looks like, but the inside has got this gap here. That's okay, it's meant to, because eventually what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch each side. So I'm just going to tuck that under and then stitch it down like that. All in all, pretty happy. So that's one side. So now we just do the same to the other side. It's just going to be a little bit more fiddly because now we've got to contend with this piece. Now if you want to, a thought I did have on this is actually tuck that under, and then you could probably double-sided tape that in place until you've stitched it. You want to use a thin double-sided tape and probably just a little bit of it. I did have this thought when I made my first one. So I'm going to put it on the lining side so it's the inside part of the stitches. And then peel the backing off if it'll come. If my nails can pick it up, which apparently today they cannot. When it doesn't want to come, just rub it back and forth. What that does is that heats it up a little bit to make the backing easy to come off. Although just nothing's working now because I'm on camera, of course. There we go. So then I can just tuck that under and press that down. And stick it down, and now it doesn't hang out. Obviously that's not the forever solution, but it's okay for now. Alright, so now we're going to do the other side. In fact, we could even probably top stitch it now. No, I'll do it later. Alright, so again, the bottom, line it up with the bottom. Now you want to put right sides together. So this is going to start seeming a bit weird. And again, we're just going to line up all of our straight edges. We're going to leave the corners. So then, if it helps to zip it up so you can see what this zip's doing, by all means do it. I don't need to, but I'm going to show you. Now it's not going to be twisted. If you were to twist this, it's going to be not a fun solution to fix. So we're going to take our center point on the zip and line it up with the center point of your fabric. I do plan on trying this with vinyl. The turn through might be tricky, but I think I can manage it. As long as I leave that whole bottom section open, we should be right. So now I've clipped the top and the bottom. I'm going to come and do the sides. But again, I actually now want to unzip it because it's being difficult to maneuver, and that's not what I want. So basically you only do it up to make sure that you've got no twists, and then it's much, much easier to undo it to finish all your clipping. And again, we're not going to do the corner yet. We're going to come and pin all of the sides together. Now I suppose if you wanted to, instead of stitching and then coming back to do the corners, you could probably clip it now if you wanted to. Like so, and then push your corners out and add lots of clips, and then you can just do one big stitch around. I would, however, advise to do it the other way if you are a beginner and wanted to make this, because permanent stitching is better than clips that can fall off. I actually plan on doing it the stitch the sections way, because I'm not interested in this dying on me. I actually just clipped that just so I can get it to sit flat, because this is where my zip is. Straight edge to straight edge. Trim off the tails. Yep, see? That's why I won't do it the other way. Straight edge. Now this is the part that I clipped. For those that are feeling more advanced and want to do it that way, by all means. And move the clip out of my way as I stitch. This is tricky enough without having all of that in my way as well. And then I'm getting back to that first corner, and I have clipped it. So I'm actually going to stitch around like that and then back stitch. So I've only got the one corner to do because I didn't do it the other way. There's no right and wrong way. This is only the second ever time I've made this. We could still end up with a complete disaster. I'm not technically finished yet. I do have faith though. This is the only difficult bit of the pattern. Everything else is wonderfully cruisy. Just if anyone's interested. Alright, back stitch. And then around the bend. Trim all that off. Fantastic. So now I've technically got the zip on. So now we just need to add our card slots. But here's the tricky part. We first need to bend this down out of the way, because this is going on like this. So we actually have to wedge the whole wallet on the inside. Huzzah! And again, we want to leave the bottom open. So make sure that you're putting the bottom at the bottom. That's probably the first thing to say. Which is, again, where the padded stuff is. Which is a good way to be able to feel where the bottom is. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to line up the sides. Then you want to bend this kind of just down and out of the way. You are going to need a lot of clips for this side. You thought I put a lot on the other side. This one's going to have even more. But this is the hardest bit of the whole thing. Everything else, cruisy. Relatively cruisy. I did go and watch another person that did a zip around wallet and their instructions, and they had a lot of glue going on in their instructional. And I went, yeah, no. doesn't really feel like something I want to be doing. Alright, so I just felt there that I'd pinched part of the zipper tape. So I just come back and fix it. And again, we're just trying to push that down so that you can squeeze this in and together. I need more clips. But so far, the clips are basically touching each other. But that's okay. Clips are your friend. That's why we use them. Now, this has been the most difficult part because this is where the zipper pull is. So what I might actually do is I might come and stitch all of the rest of it. So I might stitch from here to here and then move the zipper pull to stitch that last bit because it's in my way and I don't want it to wreck the gloriousness that will be this wallet once I get it finished. So I'm just making sure that the teeth are all the way in, so I'm not going to accidentally stitch them because that would really suck. Alright, so you can see where I'm going to start and stop. Obviously, we're going to just leave this bit so I can unzip it. But we're going to start here because again we need to leave the bottom open to be able to turn the wallet out. Now the bigger the space you leave, the easier it'll be to turn. But that's also the bigger the space you're going to have to tuck under. So just be thoughtful of that. But if it's your first one, I'd leave a pretty big gap. Now I'm basically just stitching on my previous stitches from the other side. If you've ever done piping, it's a very similar concept. I'm actually going to hand crank that corner because I was a little bit concerned. And I move my clips as I go. Remember what I said about slow and steady wins the race? This is literally what I'm doing right now. I'm doing like 4 stitches and then stopping. Okay, now I'm going to stop there. I'm actually going to take these off so that I can move that zipper. I just need to move it up to where I've already stitched. So it doesn't have to go far, just enough so that I can get this nice and flat again. And then we're just going to clip into the corner. Lots of clips. There's quite a lot of resistance because of all the stuff that's shoved in there. So I've got lots and lots of clips for the last little corner. So I'm just going to back stitch and start where I stopped and then come around to here and then stop again. So I've got this much gap to get it through. As you can see, it's not sitting flat anymore. It looks more like a pizza pocket. And I'm just trying to stitch on or next to the previous line of stitching that I've done. Alright. Back stitch there. Rethread my machine. Okay. Trim off all your tails, which you shouldn't have many if you've done them as you go. And then I'm just going to come and trim off some of the corner. Now you'll notice I'm not using my zigzag scissors or my pinking shears. That is because it's not really a lot to pinking shear off. So I'm just going to grab in, start pulling bits through. No real rhyme or reason to what I'm about to do. In a perfect world, you'd get a corner, but you also preferably want to get that other side through first. See, there's some zip. Zip's a good sign. You don't want to pull too hard. You don't want to tear your stitching, or more importantly, your fabric. I will tear my fabric before I tear this thread. I can't even grab it and break it. It just hurts my hand. So I will definitely tear fabric and seams before I tear the actual stitching, which is something I don't want to do. So again, grab parts you know you can bring through. Oh look, there's another side. There's the zipper. So this part of the birthing is, you know, quite difficult. But don't be deterred. You can do it. It can be done. I'm doing it now. So what I do is I grab it and then I kind of, I don't know, jimmy it out. Ha 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 ha! So that is the outside. Ta-da! Look at us go. We're on fire. Okay. Now I've got my edges out. Alright, I had a bit of a malfunction. We're all back. So we've turned it inside out. Now we're going to add in our foam. So you just kind of shove it in till you get it in there, and then you can smooth it all out. The foam just gives it a nice finish, so I highly recommend doing it. That's one side, and then we're going to tuck it in the other side. You'll notice that my double-sided tape is not holding as well as it did in my head, but that's okay. Alright, so you just want to make sure it's nice and flat and smooth in there. Okay, so now we're going to top stitch. So I'm going to start along the bottom edge. Now I've got my thread set to 3 1/2. I might put it up to 3 3/4. And so I just want to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this edge. So what that should do is make it nice from the other side. You could also, if you wanted to, top stitch it from the outside, but you just want to make sure that your excess is definitely tucked under. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues. So I can feel that it's tucked under. If you're a beginner, you might definitely want to start from the other side. But that is entirely up to you. And I'm just making sure that my zip is out of the way, so I'm not going to top stitch that at all. Just slow and steady. Every time I stop, I make sure my needle is in the down position so that I'm not wrecking any of my stitching movements. And get back to the start and back stitch. Now, if all went to plan, I'll stitch the bottom down. Yay! Okay, so now I'm going to do the other side as well. And then I'm going to add this in. Now, if you're super advanced, you could possibly hold that and stitch that in at the same time. Way too hard basket for me, so I'm not going to do that. And again, I want to make sure that everything is nice and even and squished. This side's easier because it's not as thick, because this side had the pocket. not the pocket, the handle, strap, whatever. Back to the start, 2 back stitches, trim off your tails. Look at that. And then that should zip around. That looks really good. The foam gives it like that added squishiness. I've got a handle. So now all that's left to do is to add in our zippered pocket. So what you want to do is you want to come over to this side, and all I'm going to do is stitch it into the side like so. So I'm going to do one side first, as in one, like both sides of this, and then I'll come and do the other side. So I just want to line all the stitching up with my other stitching if I can. And you're going to want to do this slowly because this is where the bulk is. Because we're sewing through a lot of layers now. So I'm going to go very, very slowly and then back stitch. This is where the handle is, so this is like next level thick. So I'm going to come over and do the same to this side. So I'm just going to push that over so that I can get this in. So again, this is why we don't want to over, whoop, see that just broke the thread. This is why we don't want to over interface the handle. So I've got no interfacing in this and only a single layer of vinyl, and it's still very, very thick. 1, 2, back through the first hole. So again, slowly, so that it doesn't break the thread. You can even hand crank it. You could even hand sew this in if you wanted to. That has made a little bit of a mess on the back. I've got like a loop here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out, trim it, and then just grab a lighter and melt it down. Problem solved. Now when you're using a lighter, use the blue part of the flame, not the red part. Okay, so now other side. So I'm going to do the same thing. We want to get this in. Hold it where it needs to be. So you need it to be even. And then we're just kind of going to push this over out of the way so that we can stitch it in. But we did the hard side first, so the side with the handle, because it was thicker and more difficult to do. And then we just come back, back stitch, trim off our tails, and then the other side. So grab our last tab. You want to line it all up and then bend it out of the way so you can get in and stitch it down. Back stitch. Trim off your tails and you are officially done. Ah, I love it. All right. So then it just zips around. Voila. Your zip around wallet is complete. You got your card slots. You got a spot behind your card slots. More card slots. Probably going to show you this at the start of the video anyway. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. Definitely give it a try, but definitely take your time. It's one of those ones you can't really rush through, but I do really like this pattern. So until next time, guys, bye.